First of all, I want to welcome everybody and thank you all for being here. We've been looking forward for months for this opportunity to honor not just one of the greatest people that any of us has ever known, but one of the greatest people who has lived in the last century. But before I do that, I want to acknowledge some of the VIPs in the audience, particularly those sitting in the VIP section here. We have unfortunately Stan's wife Terry, whom anybody who knows her loves her, is not able to be here today, nor is Stan Jr. But the family is well represented by several people. First of all, Stan's sister Irene.
Younger sister.
And Stan's cousin Jack, and his wife Sandy. And Peggy Dudrick. And Stan's niece, Patty Brzezinski. We also, I think, are really fortunate to have a classmate of Stan's from college, a year ahead of him at F&M, wearing his F&M tie proudly today, our first emeritus professor in the history of this school, Dr. Tom Morton. And I also want to acknowledge somebody who's not legally a member of the family, but he's was a very close friend of Stan, and that's Alan Goldstein. So I just have a few things I want to say, and they're going to be completely inadequate because there really is, I think, no great way to capture Stan completely. But Stan was absolutely remarkable, and I'm saying things you guys all know in many ways, and I'm just going to list some of the ways. One is his passion to solve a problem, and that was a problem that hit him viscerally when he early on in his training in medicine, which was that patients under the best medical care in the world were starving to death. Patients, and you've all heard him use the phrase that the surgery was a success, but the patient died because they couldn't be nourished. And so from his earliest days of training, he was passionate and pursued that passion with active engagement. He had remarkable energy and creativity. Back in the 1960s, when he was a surgical resident, residents were, depending on where you were training, on call either every other night or 5 nights out of 7. And so for Stan to take his free time, what is that, 20 hours a week? And spend that free time, supported by Terry, by the way, to say, go do this, Stan, and to work through the night to solve this problem is superhuman, I think. I don't know that there's any other way to express that. He's remarkable for his surgical skills. His specialty in surgery was repairing everybody else's mistakes. And he's remarkable for his selflessness. As we all know, anybody else achieving a tiny fraction of what he had achieved, had invented, had developed, would have patented it and protected it and made millions on it. And Stan did none of that. He intentionally wanted it to be available freely to the medical community. And then, remarkable enough in its own right, but especially remarkable in contrast to the greatness of his achievements, was, sorry, Jerry, his humility. I'm stealing Jerry's thunder. But as I said to Jerry, you can't talk about Stan Dudrick for more than a minute without acknowledging his humility. He, as Jack was just telling me, when he arrived in college, he didn't unpack his bags for several weeks because he didn't think he was going to make it. He didn't think he was going to make it. He was the guy who was, as Tom was telling me, president of every organization in college. And was he first in his class? Probably close. So, and did he change the world? So at some point, hopefully, he unpacked his bags and decided that he did belong there. Yes. And he left an enormous legacy. What is that legacy? his legacy is that he changed life for all of us in this entire world. For the better. His work, his lifetime of work, represented major advances in technology in a dozen fields. Major advances, of course, in nutritional science and in formulation and in catheter technology and in pump technology and in antisepsis and in central line management. Central lines were not nearly as important in the care of patients aside from parenteral nutrition before Stan needed to perfect it, because otherwise how do you deliver highly concentrated TPN? His work led to the development of entirely new fields of science, especially clinical nutrition, and over a half dozen societies. He trained generations of people I looked up to, I didn't realize, who were senior to me, but I didn't realize were trained by Stan Dudrick. And even in surgery, if you weren't trained by Stan Dudrick, if you had any claim to have worked with him, you bragged about it. And then, of course, paling in comparison to all that, are the tens of millions of lives that would not have been saved without Stan's work. And that has been endorsed by the view of the pediatric societies and all other sources. And so if premature infants nowadays have a survival of over 90%, when it was in the single digits in the 60s, the single biggest factor for that is parenteral nutrition. And so I could go on for hours about his legacy. I'll stop there, but I do want to say that he leaves a very strong legacy at this school. We were blessed to have him here for all the years that he was. And here's his humility, and some of you have heard me tell this story. That when I first met him, it was at a reception. We were sitting at the same table in the lobby over there, and I introduced myself, and he introduced himself. He said, "I'm Stan Dudrick." He didn't say, "I'm Dr. Stan Dudrick, I'm Stan Dudrick." And I said, I said, "The Stan Dudrick?" And he said, "Well, I guess so." He was a role model for our students. They gravitated to him. They really benefited enormously from his advice, and he took them under his wing. He loved them, and he is beloved still here as a colleague and as a friend. And I know many people in this building felt that strongly. He taught me personally a great deal, especially about I've known a lot of famous people, but I have not known very many great people. And Stanley's right at the top of that list. And what he taught me, as I've said, about humility. So I'm enormously grateful to have counted him as a colleague and as a friend. Our school and our students are grateful from all the ways that they've benefited from having him among us. And this plaque that we'll be unveiling in a few minutes will memorialize him here for generations to come. So with that, I want to yield the remainder of my time, if I've left any, to one of Stan's closest colleagues, Dr. Jerry Tracy.
Wow, tough act to follow. Kind of an emotional night. Now, I was just asked to give some personal reflections, so I'm going to be involved in the reflections. I'm apologizing up front for that. I do want to start off on a bit of a sad note. He's leaving, Dr. Scheinman.
It's not about me.
I know.
Not about me.
I won't get a shot again to do that. I said goodbye to Dr. Barden, but in any event, I'm serious. Thank you very much. Stan Dudrick. What a man. I first came in contact with him 55 years ago. I was a student, same school, and he was a young attending in surgery. Now, Penn had 1,000 attendings in surgery. But our class, as students tend to do, could be critical, not here, but some. And we were unhappy about the didactic material, the practical hands-on surgical training. Somehow, this young attending, Stanley Dudrick, volunteered to run tutorials at night for us. They were packed. Great speaker, great teacher. And that's the first time I heard him, and I was so moved that I wanted to do research with Stan. So that was my next connection as a senior. And I got in a project with him that I thought was really good. He was on another project called hyperalimentation, which I didn't know if that had was going anywhere. But I thought that the two of us were pretty much in line for the Nobel. And so I finished medical school, and I stayed on. And I spent an extra 3 to 4 weeks with him, and I got to know him really well. And we worked on it. And he used to take me over to the dog lab. So I saw these little puppies. We have a mock-up upstairs of one, but I still thought the Nobel Prize was ours. And we didn't finish it while I was a student. I stayed 3 weeks, but I gave him all the data. He was going to finish it. Out came hyperalimentation paper. Out came him becoming world famous, and a lot of the stuff that Dr. Scheinman alluded to actually began then. Now, you're probably wondering what happened to this great project Stan and I had. I'm getting back to that. So Stan goes ahead and writes, what, 450 papers, 150 awards, national, international. And the humility thing is amazing. If you ever went in his office, there was nothing around. Plain, you'd never guess he was anybody. But I got a phone call about 2008 or so from our first dean, and who was also superb, Dr. D'Alessandri, and he said, do you know a guy by the name of Stanley Dudrick? And I said, oh, yes, I do. I said, we were very closely connected because Vietnam era, they needed 2 docs from Nanticoke, and I was the one, not Stanley. So I felt a certain attachment to him for that reason. And I said, yeah, I knew Stanley pretty well, in fact. And he said, well, could you and your wife pick him and Terry up? We want to take him to dinner. We're trying to entice him to help us a bit. So, went down to the station, and as some of you know, Stanley could talk too. So he gets in the back seat, and I'm looking at the rearview mirror, and he's going on a mile a minute, and I couldn't resist. I said, Stanley, how are we doing on that paper on fat emboli in dogs with Lipomil? And he stopped, which was rare, and he said, oh my God, you are the student. And I said, yes, Stanley, I wanted to do this for 20 years. But any event, that's how he came back. That was the first night, and we got him here. Dr. Scheinman will not remember this, but he announced this at a community meeting, and I jumped up and I was ecstatic, because I knew this man. So anyway, time marches on. Stan comes here. When he came here, the thing that hit me was the humility and the expertise. He was so smart. And he was very good with students. Let me give you some examples. Virtually every student here who went into surgery went to Dr. Dudrick, asked for advice, any sort of help, often letters of recommendations, and he would really help them. Any student going into surgery. Amazing mentorship. He was a great lecturer. I went to all of his lectures that I could possibly get. I probably went to all of them. But he was a great, 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 great lecturer. But there was another facet of his work which fascinated me. Admissions. Now, Dr. Scheinman always says that the admissions committee is one of the most important, and I could attest they work hard. And Stanley volunteered to be an interviewer. And that'd be like the pitcher in the World Series trying to help with the local Little League for a while. I mean, he was so out of that category, but he was serious. And he came and he interviewed. And I could say now, because I'm no longer on the admissions committee, but nobody could analyze a student as well as he could. Nobody even close. And I couldn't understand how a surgeon, who was not known for great histories, could get so much pertinent information out of a student in a half hour. And he did. And it was really a mental status exam, and he was always, always right. Now, last on the admissions, we had a torture on Saturday on admissions. Ordinarily, we would interview 2 students. That was a piece of cake. It's Saturday, a nice day, and you have all day here interviewing. You had to be nuts to volunteer for that one. I was nuts, and they asked me if I would give the opening similar to what I'm doing now, and I said, certainly. Who shows up the first time and every other time afterwards but Dr. Dudrick? Now, I felt ridiculous, because here's the Stanley Dudrick, and I'm up there shooting my mouth off. So I had it arranged that I would be 5 minutes less all the time to get him up to the podium. And that's the only way I got him up. Then he embarrassed me. He said, I want you to be students, and I could tell you the greatest student I ever had at the University of Pennsylvania was Jerry Tracy. Wrong. Okay. And 2 or 3 times I said, Stanley, I wasn't the greatest student you ever had. Didn't answer. I finally stopped correcting him. It wasn't bad to hear it coming from Stanley Dudrick, but I can assure you it was not true. But Stanley would do that, and he would come, he would write, he would talk to students, and I would tell the students, any of you even remotely thinking of surgery, the gentleman in the back who's going to precede me, or follow me rather, the gentleman in the back, I want you to introduce yourself. So 15 years from now, as a surgeon, you'll be somewhere and at some time, and his name will come up, and you could say, yes, I met Stanley. And they did. But he would stay there all Saturday and then write these brilliant analysis on the students. In conclusion, Dr. Scheinman hit what I think was the major gift that he had. Forget his brains, forget his surgery, forget his research. But his humility was striking. It's indescribable. Anybody could talk to Stanley Dudrick. And the other thing was that he didn't change. He was the same guy 2 years ago that I knew so well as I knew 55 years earlier. Nothing changed. So that's it. I got a little sentimental, I'm sorry, but I could just tell you, great guy.
So now, I would like to ask Irene to come up and represent the family. No, not to speak. I mean, you're welcome to speak if you want. But to help me. I need some help in unveiling this plaque. Would you like to delegate someone else, or? I think it'd be great to have Stanley's sister doing this.
Yes, I'm the closest.
Okay, are we ready?
We're ready.
Thank you, Irene. Let me read this to you. Stanley J. Dudrick, MD, 1935 to 2020. Professor of Surgery, Geisinger Commonwealth School of Medicine, 2013 to 2020. Dr. Stanley Dudrick, son of Nanticoke, PA, is recognized as the father of parenteral nutrition, having spearheaded the advances in science and technologies that gave humans the ability to provide nutrition completely intravenously, revolutionizing surgery and medicine, and saving the lives of tens of millions. As you read this, lives are being preserved in this town and worldwide owing to his work. His achievements stand with antisepsis, antibiotics, anesthesia, and organ transplantation among the greatest weapons in our armamentarium against disease. In life, he was gracious and humble, despite the multitude of accolades and honors bestowed upon him. He inspired and trained legions of leaders in surgery. In his senior years, he honored us at Geisinger Commonwealth School of Medicine as a colleague on our faculty and generous mentor to our students right up to his death. We have honored him uniquely with the posthumous designation as Emeritus Professor. So I don't think there's anything more to be said, but please feel free to mingle, get to know Stanley's family, and come take a closer look at the plaque. And let's all remember Stanley. Thank you.